So if I can just, we've got all of our panelists lined up here. If I could just introduce up to the stage Bram van Olffen from Arabtec, please. Sorry, I just lost it on the TV there. I had all the names, but they've disappeared. Francis Alfred from Sobha Group, please. Jonathan Keith from K-Tech Consulting. Neil Shackleton from ALEC. Nick Harris from Omnium International. Paul Doherty from Faithful and Gould. And Scott Bear from Select Group. Great, well, we've got a pretty big panel. And so I think we're going to have to do what we can to be keeping things on track. But I think we've got a very exciting discussion as well for the morning session to really get us started off. And I think we've got some real heavy hitters on the panel as well. So I think it should be a great discussion. I think one thing that's definitely been clear is that design and build has definitely started to become a lot more prominent in recent years. I certainly know that as a consultancy, we at AESG have worked on a lot of very successful design and build projects. Fundamentally, what this seems to come down to is making sure that there are very, very strong employer requirements and a good performance spec at the beginning to help this actually be successful. I think, fundamentally, whatever contract you're looking at, any ambiguity fundamentally leads to disputes and leads to difficulty. So as long as there is a nice, clear sort of setup for this, it does help these sort of contracts to succeed. I guess just to make sure everybody's awake and start to look at an interesting discussion, I wonder if everybody in the room could put their hand up if they have worked on a design and build contract. Pretty much everybody. That's good to know. It would be interesting to know just how different that might have looked perhaps 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because certainly I think design and build has been on the rise. So I think that will probably lead us on to our first discussion, which is, has this popularity in design and build grown in recent years as a result of economic pressures, of financial pressures on projects? Perhaps just to start off, maybe it would be good if we just go around and just give a quick introduction to everybody, and then we'll move on to that question.
Yes. So I'm Scott Bayer, work as a senior manager for Select Group. I'm responsible for a number of projects here in Dubai. I have a project in Dubai Marina, and I have another quite a large project here in Business Bay that's about 6 million square feet of built-up area that we're in the process of procuring now through an ECI process with D&B. So,
okay.
Good morning, my name's Paul Doherty. I'm F&G's country director for the UAE, responsible for our businesses in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Involved in a whole host of projects across the UAE, some of which are on a design and build basis.
Morning, Nick Harris, Managing Director for Omnium. Really overseeing projects in the UAE, projects in KSA also. I've been with Omnium for 17 years and working in the Middle East for 22.
Morning everyone, I'm Neil Shackleton from ALEC. We've recently been engaged, well, in the last 2 years, working for Select, delivering Marina Gate, which is a D&B project, which I'll talk a bit about later on this morning.
Jonathan Keith, I'm the Managing Director of K-Tech Consulting. We're a security and IT consultant. We're working on many projects, mainly they're not design and build projects at the moment. But we're seeing that more and more tenders are coming out where we're designing according to design and build specifications.
Hi, good morning. My name is Francis. I'm the CEO of Sobha Group, Middle East. We are a real estate company. We also have an independent design company and a construction company, and we work most of our projects as a design and build model. We have presence across Asia, delivered 100 million square feet of construction in the last few decades.
Good morning. My name is Bram van Olffen. I am the engineering director of Arabtec, in charge of all the engineering. I came here in 2008 for the first design and build project. It was the tram project because I had experience in Europe in doing design and build.
Okay, great. Well, I think going on to the first point, perhaps, Scott, from the developer's perspective, I'll start with you. Your interest in and your move or shift towards more design and build projects, is that a consequence of sort of value? Is that perhaps financial pressures on projects?
Yeah, I think it's mostly driven by risk and allocation of risk, which is something that makes it really attractive for us. So in terms of time, in terms of cost, in terms of VE, in terms of buildability, we see a lot of value that can be brought to any kind of project from D&B. So, I mean, there's pluses and minuses to D&B as a procurement method. So it's just a case of working through the negatives and how they can be accommodated within the contract and within the procurement process, just to be able to come to a successful outcome.
Okay. And would Sobha Group agree with perhaps risk being one of the primary objectives?
I think we have started this model quite many years back, decades back, and then delivered considerable volume of projects in the design and build model. The only difference is that the design and the construction companies are in-house companies, but they work independently. The biggest advantage which comes to us is surety on the quality, the guarantee on the timely delivery. Time, of course, is important for everyone, the client, the contractor, and everyone. So we have innovated, we have brought into this model because we found that the risk is all controlled and we can ensure that there is nothing, that there's no outside stake for us.
This raises the question then, is then more risk being then consequently put onto the contractor? Obviously we have Arabtec here, we have ALEC here, and perhaps from, I'll let either of you go first. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so for us, we would rather have control of being able to manage that risk. And for us, it's got a lot to do with efficiency. We find that if we can control that design, it makes us more efficient. And that leads to, call it value add in the whole process of how we deliver. It takes away layers, we believe. So managing the design and having the consultant team working with us also leads to a better environment, we believe, for collaboration.
And Bram, you mentioned you worked on one of the first design and build contracts in 2008.
I think the idea is with design and build, you can focus more on what fits your systems, your in-house systems, let's say, in regards to formwork, your supply chain. So in that case, yeah, you have more security on your cost in the design and build. So it's not only for the contractor security on the cost, but also on the client side, because the variations are much less in design and build projects.
So far it sounds like a real win-win for everybody. I mean, who is benefiting the most from this approach?
It sounds like the contractor.
Yeah.
You say mitigates variations. That's something that ideally it should, but as you mentioned earlier, Scott, it's highly reliant upon the robustness of the employee's requirements at the outset. If they aren't clear and concise, it reduces or produces debate about variations versus design development, scope creep, and those are sometimes issues that can slow down a design build project. And the desire for the client to endeavor to influence the design during the process needs to be controlled. You need to find a trusted partner in your contractor. You need a contractor who's got a strong in-house design team or relationship with a design consultant that is proven to safeguard the employer's interests. And I think if you get the employer's requirements right at the outset, then you have the opportunity to get value for money. If you don't, you run the risk of exposing yourself to variations and dispute.
Okay. Paul, would you agree with this?
Yeah, I think, look, we've just finished King's College Hospital, which was a design and build project, single stage design and build, which I think delivering a hospital via design and build is no mean feat anywhere in the world. I think what struck me when we tendered that project was the lack of depth of maturity and understanding of design and build in the market, not only with contractors, clearly these guys, the contracting colleagues here on the panel understand it thoroughly, but the depth of understanding across the contracting supply chain is not there, nor is it with the consultant body across the UAE either. There are, from our perspective, a limited number of consultants and contractors who could engage properly on a design and build project. That came out very clearly when we were tendering King's College Hospital and asking contractors and consultants their understanding of the design and build procurement process. So I think for me, market maturity is an issue with D&B, a risk.
Are you referring to those sort of lack of market maturity being in the very front end, sort of prior to the contractor engagement, so the development of the ERs?
I think throughout the whole construction process, I think that there is not the level of understanding throughout the whole supply chain of the design and build process from beginning to end.
Would you agree with that, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, as a competitive process, like as a tender process, at the top end, like you're talking about your Arabtecs and your ALECs, like your tier one contractors, they have a really good understanding of what D&B is and how it works. But you find if you have a pool of contractors and you're doing a strong pre-qualification on those to get down to a list of guys that you feel comfortable working with, that list can shrink very quickly if you look at the organisational culture of an organisation and how design and build is ingrained within them, because how a design and build contractor thinks is different to how a traditional contractor thinks. You know, they have to have more creativity, they have to have more understanding of the process, and they really have to drive what's happening with the design itself. So you'll find that a lot of, once you leave the tier one, go to tier two and further down, you're really excluding those guys from a D&B contract in this market at this current time.
Yeah, agree.
True, but then that being said, with ever tightening design budgets, I think from a consulting point of view, it does start, or has started to become apparent that the squeeze in design budgets is leading to more of these comments of contractor to develop, contractor to complete. And even when we're going the traditional sort of red book, design, tender, construct sort of process, there is so much being left in there for the contractor to design, complete, let's say be creative with at times, sometimes cut corners, sometimes not. Perhaps Neil, I'll pass that one on to you.
I think, you know, with how we receive a lot of the design information in this market, we're not just a contractor anymore. We spend a lot of time developing that design. And unfortunately, by the time we are engaged, what we have to deliver is consequential of what information has been issued to us. Whereas if we go the design and build route, it's not consequential, it becomes something that we have an influence over and we can manage the direction it needs to go in order for us to deliver. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think a lot of the information that we get these days is not fully complete. I think there are very good reasons for that. I think often the consultants aren't given the time that they need to do the jobs that they should. I think the clients put them under unnecessary duress to start a project when it shouldn't start. And often we end up starting projects, for example, where the building permit isn't in place. And ultimately, the building permit is a litmus test to whether that design is functional or not. And we carry that can based on how a contract's been written, what the spec is as a consequence of being appointed. It becomes a road of conflict, which was mentioned just now. So it's a tough road, but that's the environment that we live in. But I think that design and build, managing the design is something that creates an easier destiny for ultimately the best project outcome, and for me the client gets the value. That's where it should sit. Yeah.
I think that the client and the contractor have to have a good relationship and have to have a lot of trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. The consultants in other countries are often working for the main contractors now. So as part of the design process, they have an initial design from the client, Yeah, that initial design from the client needs to be really clear what the scope of work of the contractor is, what the design criteria is, and then when that's passed on to the main contractor then has to hire a consultant or experts or have the experts in-house to be able to deliver the design as per what the client is requiring.
Would you agree with those points of view, Bram?
Yeah, I do, but what I do see is a change in the design and build content, let's say, that is being issued to the contractor. Previously, you get about more than 2,000 pages of engineers' requirements, while in Europe now, it's, let's say, 50 pages, and it's just on what is your performance requirements in the end. And then they leave you more to it, to what is the whole design, while in the Middle East, it's still, okay, here is your layout, you have to follow, this is the entrance, everything is detailed almost already, and it does not leave you always that free to make your own choices. So, yeah, I do see in the coming years that it will be more going in the European way, because you can better control the cost. That is the thing.
The client struggles to give away give away his power, right?
Yeah.
To give it away a little bit.
I don't think it's giving away the power. I think it actually your point there goes back to the original point I'm making, where for Arabtec and the capability you have, you find the documentation onerous, but if we're looking at a field of contractors, then we have to make sure that everything's covered and you know, everything's clear, because you know, you're more comfortable working with an Arabtec who has that expertise in-house than you would with another contractor maybe that you have to make sure you cover your bases, particularly with design responsibility.
Okay. So sort of on that note though, and perhaps this is slightly more provocative on it, but then does, when you are going the design and build route, you are opening the doors effectively to contractor proposals on perhaps at times inferior products. Does that then mean that design and build does perhaps suggest a market shift towards lower quality, or perhaps a lower quality product as an output?
I think if your starting point is that D&B delivers lower quality, that's not a great starting point, really. I think for me, the procurement process itself has to be right. So the tendered information needs to be designed to a level that removes ambiguity. The specifications need to be prescriptive for areas that really count for the client. The employer's team needs to be robust enough to manage and oversee a design that's being produced by the contractor, and also a design that's being constructed on site. And then I think finally there has to be a commercially robust change mechanism post-contract. If you wrap that all up in a procurement route, there is no reason whatsoever why quality should be lower than a traditional route.
What's the other panelists' thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Francis?
From a different perspective, because we, as I mentioned, we are a client, we are also a contractor and a designer. One thing we have noticed is the objective is very simple: to ensure timely delivery, quality is assured, cost is guaranteed. If the client is fundamentally not aware of what exactly is the requirements, and if they keep on changing, then we find that the end product suffers, the contractor suffers, the designer suffers. So something which has to be emphasized, or which is to ensure that absolute clarity from the client's perspective. Your client is ensuring that there is no changes in the process, whether it's throughout the design and build process. Again, the requirement of quality, so this is again a challenge when it comes to entity which is design and build, who is controlling the qualities. Client has to definitely take care of an additional effort to ensure there is no dilution on the end product quality. So this is something which we have learned over these years, to ensure that there's a separate quality assurance effort from the client side.
Okay. And
those requirements need to be expressed, though, right? That's the principal issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too much discretion, you will interpret what you believe is suitable to a client you've worked with before. But if there's no express provision, you end up in a debate about what it is, whether it be sanitary ware or some such other. Some of the design build projects we've worked on, part of the deliverable from the contractor at the tender stage is to set out what you anticipate using, schedule out your sanitary ware and hardware and items like that tactile and important to the client.
The more work you do up front, the easier the process is going to be. But ultimately, in my experience, having worked on projects here for a while, it's got a lot to do with who's involved on a project as well, down to individuals. And if you've got the right client, the right contractor, right consultant, you know, whether it be 2 or 3 key guys on a project that agree how they're going to behave and how they're going to manage the project, ultimately that has a very positive effect on the outcome. I mean, Marina Gate for us has been a very successful design and build project. It's 350,000 square meters of apartment space with a hotel component, and the last building will be delivered next year. That's design and build. The team that's been working on that project from Select side has engaged with us proactively. They've helped us sort out issues, and in my opinion, the product that's been delivered from a quality perspective is point in case, something that I believe the client's got what they're looking for from an aesthetic perspective, and from a construction perspective, because it's our responsibility to make sure that that building is going to last the lifetime that it should. We've put it together in such a way that that kit of parts works well. So that's the most recent example that we've got of, call it a D&B success.
I think the collaboration between the two teams on that project is the key to the success of it. Like, they just work together so well, and there was so much fluidity back and forward between the two teams that just, no matter what was going to happen, that project was going to be successful. And everyone's really happy with the finished product. The end users are extremely happy with what's been delivered. So,
I guess in comparison to the traditional sort of full design tender construct methodology, we've done value engineering recently on a number of projects which have followed that process, where generally when it's being done purely by a cost consultant, it can be very focused on elements which are quite quality driven, as opposed to being performance driven. And I think that value engineering, I mean, we are at the Value Engineering Summit, so that value engineering approach can actually benefit a lot more by bringing in some specialists. And what we found was that there were huge opportunities for savings in MEP in particular, which had been vastly oversized, and facades as well. Does a design and build approach then lend itself to also a lot more feedback and, I guess, exploration of performance in MEP, as well as on facade, as well as on structures, as opposed to design it quick and then go out to build? Scott?
yeah, so for this ECI process that we're currently undertaking with a number of contractors, we're to address the issue of having a robust documentation beforehand. We're basically responsible for the design period up to DD stage, and then we'll be signing D&B contracts with successful tender at that point, and then moving forward. So the commitment for the contractors in the design stage is to attend a series of workshops as we move through each of the design gateways. And exactly as you said, those 3 key elements are the focus of the workshop. So we have structural workshops, we have MEP workshops, we have facade workshops, and then the feedback we receive from the contractors, you know, is documented in a VE schedule and then incorporated into the design, and we move to the next stage. So we're constantly getting feedback from them, and you know, you get the positive of having the contractor involved in the design in the early stages to address buildability, to address VE, and to have their buy-in to the project itself. So as you move forward through the stages and eventually a point, you have a good understanding, or you're comfortable with the design team that you're going to, or the contractor that you're going to appoint, and they're comfortable with the design at that point. So yeah, it's a good way to do it for sure.
Any other comments on?
I think it's very important to have somebody on the client side who's knowledgeable of the whole process. Who understands
very much
the
so.
contractor, and who understands the all the process and the scope.
Yeah. Paul, did you want to add something?
I think, look, to me, the earlier you bring the contractor on board, the more successful a project's going to be, the earlier in the design process. You know, I remember back in the 80s, Latham said, in no other industry are the means of design so far removed from the means of production. You bring those together, i.e. the client, the designer, the consultant team and the contractor, at a very early stage in the project, of course it's going to work better. It's got to.
Is there a risk of contractors trying to get to site a little bit too early at times, though, as well, in the interest of keeping the program shorter?
that's a risk. So what I've just said, the flip side of that is perhaps the biggest risk in construction is commencing on site prior to the completion of design. So that is a risk, but you wrap it up in a proper procurement methodology, which is considered, then that's how you solve that issue.
But with the requirements of authorities here, like having to go through and get the building permit before you start, is it even possible to start on site early? Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're so held back, it's so constrained by the
that
authorities.
happens just quite often. But I mean, for us, what we would rather do, we're not in a rush to start on site. We would rather get the information up front, make it clear, and make sure that we're ready to start at the right time and then execute the work. So our approach we're trying to change is, instead of getting onto site and spending that time, money, etc., building, when in fact we end up making certain mistakes or things haven't been thought through correctly, that costs everybody money and that ends up in conflict inevitably, it's better to say, listen, if the design team needs an extra 2 or 3 months, take the 2 or 3 months, we'll work with you, let's get everything right, and then let's start. And it's if the client has the ability to allow us to take that time instead of being forced to start, that actually helps us to deliver efficiently.
Definitely that we have quite noticed it, early availability of the designer and the contractor. Like it also helps us in the early procurement process, a larger time duration for negotiations, which helps the contractor and the client to in turn benefit from the procurement process. So the early advantage comes in rather than in the construction. I would believe that the process of buildability, constructability, procurement, all of it is the bigger advantage in this process.
Okay. Is there a hybrid perhaps of the two though, where we're not simply just doing employees' requirements and a performance spec, effectively a concept level design and then going design and build, but perhaps taking that a little bit further, up to perhaps a 50% detailed design? I think you touched on this earlier in a conversation we had outside, that sort of taking up to a 50% detailed design with an early contractor engagement, and then perhaps still, is there even any point going design and build when you've already done 50% detailed design?
With the ECI process, you're bringing the contractor in early, so you're still getting their feedback. And then once you're at DD stage, you have a good understanding of what you're delivering. So as a developer, we have a brand, we have a standard that we have to maintain that our clients know us for. We have a name for what we deliver. So it's about protecting that and maintaining that. Like, you can't just give that over to the contractor with some basic documents and hope that somehow they'll be able to achieve that. So for us, yes, it needs to be like that. Like, we need to have that control, but then it goes back to where we started with the allocation of risk. So there's still, in terms of the detailing and in terms of how things are put together, that's left to the contractor, which is really their expertise. So instead of leaving it with the consultant, you're leaving it with the contractor.
Okay. Bram?
So it sounds like the model that you're referring to relies upon that early contractor engagement, presumably working with you towards a target cost to a point in the design where you execute the contract at a fixed price lump sum.
Exactly.
That's
exactly, yeah.
Okay. So that is very different, of course, to handing over half a dozen drawings and saying, here's my requirements.
Exactly. I mean, we were talking before about using hotels as an example, and the operations manual that comes with hotels, just as a general thing. I mean, not too many developers have that level of detail ready to go, straight off the bat. So it is project specific and has to be developed separately for each project. Every project's different. So. And
for the contractors, when you're faced with that scenario, obviously the time to invest, work towards the design, the reward, the incentive, securing the job at the end of that process, versus a fixed price lump sum, employs requirements, and a short bid cycle. Do you find you're given enough time to offer a competitive price in a scenario which is not down achieving a target cost through a preliminary design phase? Simply, there's my concept, there's my requirements, there's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to send a proposal.
Sorry, I just will add one thing to that. It is a limited
number of
contractors in the scenario I'm talking about, whereas with a scenario you're talking about, you could be one of 15 contractors.
No, I agree, but I'm just, time is precious, of course, and you talked about...
Well, would you rather do 15 tenders, or would, with a chance of winning one, or would you rather be involved in this process?
The two options, whether you, as a client, you believe you want to get to market an award and announce you've awarded a key project in a short time frame, having pressurised your design consultants to achieve preliminary design and your requirements quickly, and then a compressed tender stage versus a more prescribed and collaborative effort that you seem to adopt. Because we see both, and more often than not, we see the shortcut route of a limited scope of works, limited requirements, a short tender turnaround time for you.
If you look at, because we are working with Select now on one of their tenders, let's say ACI process, because you have narrowed it down to, let's say, a selected group of contractors, your chance of winning is also bigger, and that's why you are more open to sharing all the things, so you can steer the design into your method of construction. So I do agree that with the ACI process you have a bigger chance, let's say, of winning, and it is more favorable for a contractor than with a design and build contract where they will just issue it to like...
But also offering value back to the client as well as part of that tender process.
Yeah.
We would always opt to work on a project that has a more complete design than a less complete design, looking at the issue with variations for us. We very seldom in our minds get treated fairly when it comes to variations. We don't make money as a contract on variations. Changes cost us. So we might get paid for the material used, but we very seldom get paid for the actual time and labor that it takes for us to achieve variations. So we would prefer a project where the design's well thought out, the consultants have been given the opportunity to stipulate exactly what they want, and we go out and we execute exactly what's required. And especially in this market, the less change that you have, the more consistent we are in to be able to deliver, the more secure we are with where we're going to go with our costs, and ultimately it's about delivering a project that the client's going to be happy with on time. So design is key for us, and then the soft side of how we actually engage as a group. Yeah.
So on that basis, do you see design and build as more risk or less risk?
I see design and build as having a fair amount of risk associated to it, but for us, we would rather work in a design and build environment, take on that risk and manage the process in, I say again, an efficient way, and it's really about collaboration for us. Taking away unnecessary layers of, I mean, if you look at the process of just a material submittal, having inspections on site, the iterative process of how we have to do everything in our industry takes time and costs us money. And by getting rid of those layers and putting a process in place where we can really collaborate, the client makes decisions, the consultants are part of making those decisions, and we as a contractor are enabled to deliver, because that's our job. We want to deliver you a product on time and hopefully secure our margin, then that's a massive success for us, and it's very difficult.
You also said a really interesting point there, which is that on variations you're very rarely treated fairly. And I think I would completely agree with you there that this does seem to be the way these variations often go. Does that mean then, though, some degree of change is always inevitable on projects?
No problem.
And does that then mean that through a design and build process, that from an employer, a developer's, a client's perspective, it's your ability for change is vastly reduced because of knock-on consequences on cost? Perhaps Francis, I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
So, we as a client, we have a set of standard requirements. So this is quite clear. So when it comes to the changes required, it's very minimal, and we have over the period of time standardized a lot of things. So when it gets to the stage of design or design and build, it is almost certain requirements which we have almost over a period of time standardized. So in our specific case, the question of variation is dramatically less, because we have standardized to our advantage at various types of project, and it's very limited risk in our specific case.
But fundamentally, you will always get some degree of changes because of authority approvals, let's say. So, civil defense may reject a certain skylight you're looking at or a certain material you wanted to use. You may find that you can add an extra floor onto a building. Does that level of change lead, perhaps Paul, maybe you want to?
No, I think you outline that from the word go in a clear set of rules of engagement about how change is going to be managed during the course of the project. One thing is certain, things will change, definitely. But if you have a procedure post-contract, a contractual commercial procedure post-contract that is understood by the team clearly, everybody understands their roles and responsibilities, then change is managed the same way as it is on any other contract.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was on one project, it was design and build, they changed the hotel operator. If you are in the beginning stage of the design and build, there is no issue. But if you are already, because I did another hotel, when you're already on site, it's a big issue. Because you have a lot of labor, everybody is idle, you can't work. So in that case, yes, I mean, it depends on which stage you are in the design and build. Can changes happen? Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from any of the?
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some mechanism in place to be able to have change on a project. Yes. And, D&B is traditionally, one line, this is my price, thank you very much kind of thing, but that doesn't hold water here. Like you need BOQ, you need a cost summary analysis or something that you can use to be able to manage change.
In design build, you have to be a lot more flexible with those sort of changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Traditionally, if there's a change, then the contractor puts his variation and he negotiates how to get paid for that. If he gets paid or not, then that's another question. Right. But in design build, there has to be a more flexible process.
Yeah, it comes down to what Neil was saying before about having the right project team and the right attitude in place. Like you have to know that you're working in a construction building. Your goal is to get to the end to the standard that you're looking for, and everybody has to be able to work towards that.
Yeah. Okay. Is it advocated generally as well that the same consultant that's been involved pre-contract should often be novated over to the contractor post-contract as well? There's obviously going to be natural benefits to that, but whether that's always the best approach, perhaps Neil.
Yeah, I think there's absolute value in bringing that knowledge base through. I mean, I think one of the tough things that we deal with in our industry is unfortunately how we have knowledge built on a project and then that team is disbanded. And then we'll take, a year down the line we'll go and build another project and we don't manage to put together that same team from a consultant, client, etc. perspective. That value's lost. So I think it goes, my statement's qualified that as long as it's the right consultant with the right approach, right attitude, led by a person who directs the team and we can collaborate, then absolutely it's the right decision. To bring that team through, bring that knowledge base through the execution means that there's that accountability and that knowledge base as the project's been built on paper and then into reality. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot of value in that. Yeah.
Okay. So if we could just give a round of applause to close up for our panelists. If you could just give...